Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another special guest today. This guest is a friend of mine. We invested together, done some legal work for him, known each other for a little while now. He's a physician. He's an entrepreneur. He has several startup companies. He's a real estate investor, real estate syndicator. He's one of the smartest guys I know. Please help me welcome Harsha Moole. Harsha, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for the really good introduction, Ferd. Glad to be here.
Well, great. Glad to have you. I know you obviously, but for our audience that may or may not, please tell us a little bit more of your background, and we'll get into how you got into real estate and in MHP in particular.
Great. So I started off as a physician, grew up in India, moved here 10 years ago. We have a family business real estate background back home in India. Kind of wanted to emulate real estate ventures in America, but it's obviously a different playground. Took me a couple of years to learn. We started off with, while working as a doctor, I take paid time off, 15 days a month. That gave me a lot of time to spend, go to these real estate seminars, learn a lot of stuff. Started off in multifamily space. This was about 2016, 2017. The market was very hot. Then we were looking to kind of venture into something where market is not as hot, but would provide us a good segue to kind of focus on real estate deals. And that's how a buddy of mine kind of told me about mobile home parks at the end of 2017, 2018. Took me about a year to learn about them. That's eventually kind of felt like that's a great asset class. And we can talk more about why or what the key points are in the mobile home park space that we like. But that's how we got into mobile home park space. Prior to mobile home park space, we did a bunch of apartment complexes, redevelopment projects in Midtown, Kansas City, in the commercial real estate space, mostly in gentrifying areas. We syndicated deals. Right now, we do acquire like 2 to 4 properties every year in the syndication model. Whenever possible, if we see good deals, we try to be as LPs funding those deals and so on and so forth. It's kind of a pretty big spectrum of what we do, but we stick to our fundamentals and we just want to be in the right asset class at the right time.
No, makes sense. And I know from deals we've looked at together, one thing you've got a keen eye for is kind of looking at the numbers and looking at assumptions, because as we both know, you're a syndicator, I'm a syndicator as well. And there's a lot of numbers you can manipulate, there's a lot of variables into a pro. You can look at a spreadsheet. Oh, great. Well, what if you manipulate the cap rate a little bit, the interest rate a little bit, the lease absorption rate a little bit, market rents a little bit, and you do that 3, 4, 5 times, it's exponential growth. So give us some tips and tactics as to what you look for as an LP, and then also when you're, just if you're going to be a GP as a syndicator, what you do to be kind of bulletproof. That's I kind of look at it like that. I think I've told you this actually, that I played baseball, and in baseball you get 3 strikes. But as syndicator, it's a 1-strike game.
You can't mess up.
I can't mess up. So you don't want to get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. You don't want to fail project. You don't want to have unrealistic expectations. So let's get it right first time, every time. So far so good. But all right. But tell me about your analysis.
It's a challenge, meaning for someone new to real estate, especially when you talk about these high net worth accredited people that we work with. Mostly I work with physicians, 95%, 5% here and there. Like I have passive investors who are attorneys or some sort of high level engineers from the California area. And folks, it's sad, but they're not very educated on what cash flow means, what IRR means. Well, a syndicator might go and pitch them, hey, the IRR is like 30%, but they're on their pro forma, it says the sale cap is 4%. Like you and I know the sale cap is 4% is unreasonable, but they don't know. They're going to look at the IRR and say, you know what, this deal is great. I'm going to put my money into this deal. Well, on the other side, I'm pitching this same investor a deal which says, hey, IRR is only 16%, but my sale cap is more reasonable, 7.5 to 8 cap. Which is more realistic. But obviously the guy, the greater investor, so to speak, would prefer a higher IRR, but they wouldn't know how these numbers will work out until the end of the life cycle of the deal, which is 5 to 10 year time frame. So it takes a lot of convincing to kind of get them up to speed with, hey, you know what, this is the market comps. In the last 2 years, we have seen that the sale cap is averaging between 6 to 8 based on the location. 4 sale cap is unrealistic, and it takes time to drill in that piece of information to investors. Most of the time, like these email newsletters, they work sometimes, but most of the folks who are busy, they tend to look at it as promotional content and they don't pay attention to it. So it takes multiple phone calls, one-on-one conversations, meet them in person, talk to them, small bits and pieces of these information. Like I try to pass it on as one-on-one information to these investors, saying, and that's when they know, okay, when I present them a deal next time, they just don't completely blow it off, comparing that to some unrealistic IRR numbers, and they say, okay, this is something that we know about. But otherwise, to your question on what should LPs look for, I think there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be done. I like to call LP investment structure, there's a famous, like everybody tries to call it passive investment. In my mind, I don't think it's passive. I call it semi-passive. And there is still a lot of work that needs to be done prior to putting in money into like as an LP. You have to look into the operator experience. What have they done in the past? How many have they? Like I think completing the whole cycle is really important for operator. For example, I personally know a couple of operators in Kansas City. They're just starting off 3 to 4 years ago, very aggressive, 4 to 5 deals per year. And nobody knows what their like exit plan is, but they keep promising these 30, 40 IRRs, which are unrealistic, and it's hard to kind of like put them to like a test because we don't know what they're going to do. So I think with operators, you just have to look at their past experience and their boots on the ground and how their performance look. This is where it gets tricky when you look at performance. Like I said, it's a challenge. For regular folk to know what normal underwriting is, to kind of separate it from realistic underwriting, and that's kind of where like they should probably reach out to other experienced folks to learn what a normal estimates are. So that would help them obviously have a legal person look at it. Just don't sign a document because it just looks very lucrative deal. So I think it's a combination of a lot. I think it would take at least like 20 to 30 days to do the work of due diligence, even on an LP standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah, I think from my experience, you're the most diligent LP I've ever met, because you ask a million questions and then you understand the numbers, and you even have, if there's something in the PPM you don't understand or you want to second, you've hired your own legal counsel to review it, and I think that's going to set apart your investments as LP, and it's going to set you up as a better GP on the deals you do, the syndication. Because I see that, I look at a lot of deals and put some money in other people's deals, one, to learn, but two, to see if they're messing up, frankly, and see what not to do. But I mean, I was just thinking recently, there's two types of ways I feel like a GP can mislead or misinform LPs. And one is by aggressive assumptions. And you covered that. Things like, oh, look, the cap rates, the IRR is huge, but the cap rate is influencing that. The cap rate's unrealistic. So your variable that's an assumption is leading to an end result that's unrealistic. That I think is malicious. And sometimes there's another way of misinformation. I just looked at this on a syndication, another mobile home park operator. I was under the hood on his PPM and such, and there was a misinformation based on a lack of understanding of the financial metrics. In particular, internal rate of return is a pretty complicated concept for a lot of people, measuring cash inflows and outflows, the timing of such, debt pay down, appreciation, and cash flow. It kind of blends the overall yield, as you know, but this other person was just taking the end net proceeds, and let's say it was $300, and they're saying it took us 3 years to get there, so that's an average of $100 per year. And if you invested $50, okay, it's 50 into 100. Like, wait a second, and I think a real example was like they invested 300, so they made 100 on the free. They said, oh, it's a 33% return. I was just like, but there was no cash flow. And I was just like baffled. I don't think the operator recognized what they were shooting out to their investors was inaccurate. So I don't think it was malicious as much as just misinformed. And as a result, that misinformed other people. And I want to actually do a whole podcast. Logan, my business partner, who's another financial guy. I'm still arm wrestling him. Like, we just need to shred these other guys' PPMs and offering memorandums. And he's like, that's too mean. So all right, maybe we won't. But I mean, I think it's a disservice to the community to have misinformation out there. And you're doing a good job, I know, of vetting the operators and vetting the PPMs to make sure that it doesn't happen.
No, I think in regards to your podcast idea, I definitely think you should do it more so to educate people more than anything. Meaning, I just feel bad for limited partners or passive high net worth folks who get into these deals expecting those unrealistic, falsely promised numbers, so to speak, and then 5, 10 years down the line they get burnt. I think if anything, like that's kind of what I try to do is, I mean, I don't have a podcast like show like you, but my interactions are mostly one-on-one. When I talk to guys, I try to ask them, hey, what are you looking at? They kind of tell me a couple of decks that they looked at, and then I say, hey, this is what I think happens there, and this is why I think those numbers are not good. So I think educationally, I think there is a lot that folks like you and I can do to kind of get the word out saying, hey, there's so many ways that people can mess up those numbers in a bad way.
No, well, good. I'm gonna tell Logan we're voting 2-1 so far. You just got an equal vote with him, by the way.
Yeah.
So those are definitely some good tips on the syndication standpoint. As a mobile home park owner, tell me some of the tips you learned, on your first deal and as you're going into other deals now. What you've learned so far, you can share with our audience and how you're going to react differently in the future. Or perhaps the same. Perhaps you didn't make any mistakes in your first couple deals, but typically we all learn as we go along in deals, and new asset class is always a new challenge for investors.
Right. I think from where I stand, I try to be extra conservative or extra protective in the way I do deals. I'm not very bold, and I don't go do things and then learn later. Before I step in, I try to make sure I have at least one or two folks around me that know the industry really well, so that they can walk me through it and lead me through it. Even if it comes at an expense of certain percentage of the deal, but not, it makes sense because as a syndicator, like going back to your rule book, one strike, that's it. Like you can't do a mistake. It's a brand, it's a name of the company, it's people have trust in what we do, and you don't want to ruin that. If that comes at an expense of a certain percentage of the deal, I'm more than happy to pay that up and work with the right team to get started. So when I first moved to mobile home park deal, you were one of the first persons that I spoke to. We had a free tour of your development park, great experience. We felt like, what, this is something that really works. And that was the first time when we had a practical sense of, this is an industry that we want to be in. Until then, there is so many misconceptions on mobile home park, trailer park, quote unquote, saying, you don't want to get into that industry. But that's when we felt like, this is a good space where you can provide affordable housing to folks and be on the good side of the industry. Now, in regards to tips, I guess the big thing is buying mobile home parks is more intricate than getting an apartment complex, so to speak. I've been in both the spaces, so when I compare these, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into mobile home park on a relative scale to apartment complexes. Apartment complexes, you can just hire an inspector. Inspector goes, does their thing. Okay, HVACs are bad, whatnot, fix it up. But mobile home parks, most of these have been there for like 50, 60, 70 years. There's a lot of title complications. There's a lot of utility complications. Who knows how the water sewer systems are? There's a lot of grandfathering in. Nobody knows what the rules of how many lots this has. Can this have more lots? So I believe extra effort needs to be put in on upfront before you buy the asset, and then later realizing that you did a mistake. That's kind of where I felt like you need like a strong somebody that knows the ins and outs better. Like for me, it happened to be you, where like when I first bought my first asset, you were by my side guiding me through the legal work, title work, zoning. And if I went into mobile home park space just with my multifamily background, I would have definitely missed most of those. And majority of the times, people might be just fine, like even not having an MHP specialist by your side. But there is like many times with the intricacies that I just mentioned, the title work, zoning, grandfathering, that there's high potential for getting burned at a later date. So that I think is a big difference in my opinion. I mean, once it gets to once you buy it, the operations goes out. That's a different whole ballpark. But for me, acquisitions was a big thing that kind of stood out in MHP space compared to multifamily space.
No, those are good points. Thanks for that. What I find on a regular basis with, with some of my clients too is, um, I think the biggest of the clients, the guys in the industry, the REITs and some of the top 10 players, they're very sophisticated, right? And they probably don't make a lot of mistakes. And then you got the rookies down here in their first deal, and then they feel like they're way underperforming compared to the mid-level guys. But what I've found is a lot of times people tackle the small person tackling one deal that's like, this is my own real money, and I'm signing the note myself. They're better at due diligence because they're all in and they're a little paranoid. Now, they may not be educated to know what a phase one environmental is, but they're educated enough to ask and say, I don't know what I don't know. And then they ask. Where I have a new client that owns, I don't know, 30 or 35 parks. And I asked them, I said, who's doing your title objections? And they're like, well, if nothing pops out, we don't really care. And I was like, well, who's looking at your survey for easements and encroachments and liens? And they're like, we don't do surveys. I'm like,
We don't.
I'm like, you have 35 parks, you don't do surveys? No, we don't have to worry about it. I was just like, whoa. Where I think that's a pretty big operator. I don't know what those parks are worth, but $1 million a piece, you're in a $30 million portfolio. That's a pretty big deal. And you don't pay for surveys. It's like, well, I can't do legitimate title objections if I don't have a survey in front of me. And I get other people saying, I was buying a wholesale deal from a guy, and he said, I said, what do you have done? Do you have a survey done? You have title commitment? Do you have a phase one? He goes, oh, you don't need a phase one on this one. It's in a nice area.
Nice area.
I was like, I'll pay for phase one, all right, But so these are pretty good sized guys. So I mean, I tell you that to say, I have some clients. I had a lady yesterday. She called me. She goes, I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't pay for these things on my first deal. And she's calling me on the second deal. I go, that's okay. You're now aware and you're doing the second deal. There are people who are 30 deals in and are running rogue. Like, I don't need that. I'm like, you need that, and I'm not, this isn't, you don't ask the barber if you need a haircut, right? Because the barber's always going to say you do. I'm like, I don't own the survey company. I don't own the phase one company. Like, this is not me trying to drum up the legal bill. This is me giving you legitimate legal advice or just practical advice to protect you. And it, it's kind of like talking to my kids. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But
yeah.
So that's definitely a good tip to I say be paranoid. Be paranoid in your due diligence. Don't try.
And at the end of the day, I think it's long-term safe investment is what you look for. I mean, for like syndicators like you or I, we look at risk before reward. You want to make sure you don't lose what you put in, forget about what you're going to make.
Absolutely. And I know Frank Rolfe, who's obviously one of the titans in our industry, he always references Sam Zell, who's probably the biggest titan in the industry. It's hard to get access to, right? I'd love to have him on my podcast. Here I am calling him out, so maybe he'll do it. But he talks about that, risk reward analysis, risk reward ratio, and you want to look for asymmetric risk reward profile. Yeah. And a lot of guys don't do that. I mean, I've got some people that are LPs in my deals, and they're like, no, I don't like this deal. I want that last deal. I'm like, well, that last deal was riskier because it was infill. It was more of a medium lift or heavy lift. This current deal is right down the fairway. It's hard to screw up. So you're not going to get the same yield. And they're like, but I want that yield. Like,
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, if I offered that yield in this deal, I wouldn't even be calling you. I'd have filled it up by now, Right. So it's important to have that, and have that view on life. I think is a risk reward palette ratio. So that's good.
Absolutely.
What other tips can you share, Harsha, or if you got any stories or nightmare scenarios you can share? Those are always fun too.
Well, nightmare scenarios, I wouldn't call it a nightmare, but the first part you probably noticed, we had like a heavy workload on the title work at closing. That was something that we did not expect. And yeah, I remember you famously saying that was one of your worst like title experiences you've had in your entire career. So it pushed the closing by a couple of days, and we had to kind of go back and forth with the title company, I guess. So that was a big, and again, I was glad to have you and your team by my side to kind of walk you through it. But that was a painful, I guess, like 14, 15 days to get that done. And again, going back to tips, I guess the moving newly relatively into this space, the biggest challenge for me was, well, you have so many deals on the market. on the in the multifamily space, you see a listing, you put in an offer, but most of the listings in our space, all of the park space right now, for some reason, for guys like you who have been in the market for a while, and guys like me who are relatively new, we feel like the cap rates have compressed so much that you don't find anything meaningful on the market. So acquisitions has been like a real pain point, and we've been trying in multiple creative ways to find ways to acquire properties at rates that we feel are good for business. And direct mail marketing, direct phone calls, trying to have someone work for you who can lead you to the mom and pop owners so you can buy directly from them. So that I think has been like a biggest challenge in the industry. It takes a lot of work, which we were not expecting, but we're putting in right now. I think over time, hopefully that'll reward us with more properties, but that's been something that we were not expecting to see in the space, but we right away, like I think like 1 month after like we got the last park under contract, we realized, you know what, it's not easy. It took us 1,500 letters to get that one asset in Nebraska that we closed. That's kind of why when we realized we have to scale up those operations by multiple fold to at least be hopeful of finding more properties. And as days pass by, more folks are entering into the space. They see this as a stable, risk mitigated asset class for how fluctuant the economy is, and it's getting even more difficult to find these deals.
No, I definitely see that personally, and I hear that from people all the time. I think one thing that I know you're doing that I'll caution others to also do is to not lower your standards. Now you have to be aware of market conditions. It's going to be hard to find the 12 cap on market, right? The 10 cap on market, probably even the 7 or 8 at this point. Off market, yeah, those deals can be found. They're just hard because there's so much competition space. I hear other people saying, well, I wanted to get this, but it wasn't available, so I went to this. And that's things like I went to private utilities. I went for a lower cap rate. I paid for pro forma rents. I capitalized the park on home income. These are things that, those were the 4 cardinal sins, back in 2014 when I got started. And to some degree, like I bought septic this year. I'm under contract on septic. I don't like septic as much as private, but I inspect the septic. And one of them failed inspection, so we had to sell or replace it. The other one was new in 2015. Okay, I'll take that. That's a mitigated risk, right? A risk reward profile. And that's a 12. The one that I'm under contract for is a 12 cap, and it's got septic, right? But hey, it's a great pricing, and we got it first day on market from a residential realtor. So lucky, right? That it didn't hit the airways yet, but that's something that I think people are making mistakes on in this competitive market. And I look forward. I say look forward. I feel like what's Sam Zell's nickname's the Grave Dancers. Maybe he's my mentor here. But I look forward to the day 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when a lot of these guys, realize, man, I shouldn't have paid a 4 cap on pro forma in rural Iowa just because it says Iowa at the end of the address. Like, you're going to end up choking on that deal when you try to get a new loan, when you try to exit. What if you can't implement? Right now, home prices are up like crazy. HUD states, you got set install case prices that are getting out of control. You got to have an understanding of the risks instead of rose-colored glasses. And so that'd be my tip response for other listeners based on your comment, which is not uncommon. That look, my choke point in my supply chain is reasonable deal flow. And it's the same for most everybody. Some guys are solving the problem by buying 9-unit parks in Mississippi on Lagoon and park-owned homes.
I could agree more. I've seen investors compromise a lot on their acquisition criteria, and there's always some sort of justification when you ask them, saying, "Oh, you know what? The market's really hot, and we had to go get this property." Well, you did not have to get that property. If you look at long-term risk-reward ratio, I mean. And I think that's kind of like where we feel like one of our very strong points is the group of investors that I work with, they're all doctors. They're not looking for active cash. They're looking for generational wealth. They just place their money and give stable returns. So we don't have the pressure to meet any criteria saying, hey, we need so many assets per year. So we just look each deal by its own and say, okay, this meets our criteria, we're going to buy into that. So, but that's kind of not what we see in the market. A couple of days ago, I had a meeting with another doctor who is also mobile home park owner now. They bought like 4 parks in 1 year. I was like dumbfounded. I was like, how did you find them? I was like, well, we found all of them on the market. We bought it at like 5.5 cap, but I think they have potential to become 10 cap. Well, do you have an operator? No, they don't have an operator. Do you live in the same towns? No, I don't live in the same town. Well, how do you plan on infilling them? No answer. So I think those are some of the mistakes like that. I mean, I know being with the right company, I know that's not a good move, but they don't. And it just pains me to see what's happening in the market with some of the investors.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I see it happen all the time too. It's like, I'm going to fill these 50 lots. It's like, new homes or used homes? I'm going to look for used homes. Like,
Yeah.
have you looked for used homes during your due diligence? Because I'm having trouble finding used homes right now, and you're banking on 50 of them.
Right.
How do you have cash? If those 20 grand a pop, you have $1 million cash. No, I'm just going to get a loan. You're going to get a loan on used homes. Okay. From who? It's harder, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
from the landlender, maybe. What kind of leverage? You need down payment? Who's going to do the SAG? I mean, it goes back to that. You as a doctor, I know you're not in the same lane of medicine, but the post-mortem. The
Right.
post-mortem. I don't know if it's Jocko Willink or it's probably not. There's lots of guys say do the pre-mortem.
Right.
If I was to die, how would it happen? And then try to solve. I'm going to die because I smoke, I drink, I'm overweight, and I stay up too late. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? You can solve that before it becomes a problem. That becomes death. Well, people should do that analysis, and what if I can't find used homes? What if I can't get loans on these? And then what they're going to do is going to talk themselves out of paying a forecast on a deal that can't support new homes. So, but it's unfortunately, as Benjamin Franklin said, common sense is not all that common.
And I see a lot of
that's what we're trying to do here. We're educating people to try to help them.
Yeah, and some of the stock market terms hold true in mobile home park industry. There's a famous term called FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. I see that a lot in mobile home park space right now. You just want to get in. I want to get in. It's so hot like this, but get in, but get in the right way.
Yeah, you're right. When I bought my first single family house, I was right out of college, and I had 14. I was about 6 months out. I'd saved up $14,000. And that's what I need for a down payment. And, mowed grass and, babysat and painted fences and, it didn't spend anything. So I'd saved up enough money for a down payment. I think my parents lent me the closing cost, and couldn't even get over the hump at that time. And I was trying to think where I was going with that. Now that I'm blanking.
We were talking about anyways.
Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Fear of missing out. All right. Well, apparently I completely lost my mind. I don't remember what I was thinking, but the fear of missing out is I am seeing people on a regular basis being like, I got to get in this deal because it's my first deal. And that's where I was going. That's my first deal. I know, I remembered. See, my first deal, I only had 14,000. If I missed, there's one strike. I don't have more money. If the first deal was bad, I was not going to do a second deal. So I was like, it's got to be right, and I got to hustle. I got to get it done. Well, I see these guys jumping in mobile home parks. I got to get the deal. I'll tell them. And a lot of times in my class, I'm like, hey, I'm not here to opine as your business deal unless you want me to. If you want me to do your title work, great. You want to do your zoning letter, great. LLC, great. But sometimes guys say, no. What do you see that's a problem? And I'll tell them, this is a huge problem. I wouldn't do this deal if I were you. Wouldn't touch a 10-foot pole. And some of them say, good point, but I got to get in the game. It's my first deal, and then I'll learn from this. And I'm like, but if your first deal ruins it for you and you lose your money, or you work yourself to death, or you ruin your investment profile, your reputation, it's your first and last deal. So it's, my dad always says this, the best deal I ever did is the one I didn't do that I shouldn't have done.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. You better be out of the game than like get in and do a mistake. That can be more correct.
Good.
Great.
Well, Harsha, this is good. Anything else you want to share with our listeners? If you want to pause and think about it for 3 minutes, you can do what I just did. But if you're lighter on your feet than me, then you can
No. I think the big thing for since this is more mobile home park focused podcast, and your audience are mostly mobile home park folks, pretty much getting into the game. I'm very new to the game. I still consider myself taking baby steps towards learning more from experienced folks like Ferd and everybody else. It's a steep learning curve. There's a lot of places where people can do mistakes. So try to associate yourself with experienced people in the industry, and don't just buy a park because you have to buy a park. Buy a park which you think will make sense financially. And making a mistake is very easy and it's very tempting. That's how the market is. I've been through a couple of markets, so I know how things can go wrong. So I guess like that's kind of a word of caution. But again, like it's an amazing risk mitigated space. It's at this time it's my favorite investment space. I've been in stock market. I've been in angel investing. I've been in commercial space. I've been in multifamily space. Now I'm in mobile home park space. So I get when I look at returns, or like let's say I have like X capital to invest. Every investor has separate motive. Like at the end of the day, for folks that I work with, for doctors, you always want a risk mitigated way of investing for generational wealth growth. And I honestly feel like MHP space is a great spot to be at right now and going forward for at least, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years, unless some zoning laws change and whatnot. But just be careful when you play around. That's kind of my take home point, I guess.
All right. Great tips, Harsh. Appreciate it. Where can people find you after this episode?
We have a website, www.physicianestate.com. You'll have all my contact information there, just like real estate, but physician estate. We're like a group of 60 to 70 doctors investing our funds together and doing syndication deals. If you're a high net worth individual, and if you're willing to or looking to save some money in the form of taxes or get some tax payments back with real estate professional status, hit me up. I'll be more than happy to get on a phone call with anyone and talk to you guys. So, yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Harsha.
Well, thanks for having me. Bye bye.
Got it.